probably, best case scenario is that we actually have areas that were identified, and we share that on our EV website. It says these are the areas that we're looking for EV DC fast chargers, and it probably would be, here's the areas where we're not looking for anymore. And so it will be very transparent around it.
Just to come with the experts that you heard today will be working with us as well.
And mine is a follow-up question to that with regard to Barney's presentation. You know, if they're hidden somewhere, then people aren't going to use them. So it seems like you should be laying some sort of criteria out about visibility and access and people having a reason to be there.
We agree.
And then with respect to how does this leverage, so will you be investing twice that much, 3 times with the grant that you have? I was thinking that maybe this amount would go down and would go to other, because you have the DC charging grant program. So how is this money going to leverage that DOE grant money?
So there's kind of a little bit, I'll say it, kind of a little bit of a wall between the two. They are going to leverage each other, but for some good reasons, there's a little bit of a wall. We fully expect that some folks that are taking advantage of this program maybe also be taking advantage of the grant-based program, and there isn't a restriction for that. So what we expect is we'll probably be able to do more of these because there's more of these are going to be installed because of that.
I think that, Sarah, were you asking about the DOE grant?
Yes, DOE.
Yeah, so the DOE grant,
Go ahead.
what Bill was referring to was the custom project. The DOE grant is going to be, that's providing funding for these experts to come in.
Oh, so it's not providing infrastructure funding?
Very small amounts, and other programs are complementary, but it leverages what this
Okay,
program.
I thought it was providing money for infrastructure.
There's some in there.
There's some, but
He's
most of
making
the
nuance.
infrastructure is coming. So the step is, it provides as is a match as the cost share, and then the DOE's provide some additional funding to bring in these experts to do some other smart mobility programs to really make it a much more robust program than just an infrastructure incentive program.
Sorry, just to quickly follow up. So what will the experts be doing then? Can you just define what you mean by smart mobility?
I don't believe that's part of the, I don't know, do you?
And that's how
It's timing, so we need just to make sure. Yeah, if you can take that off.
Yeah,
Sam, I think
that's
that'd be
fine.
a
I was
good
just
idea.
curious.
On this one, I don't recall if it said in the tariff, but this one is it's pre-approval, but then do they get paid after it's installed?
This one
After
requires,
I know it's
because
pre-approval, but also.
if they come in and ask for a DC fast charger, if they ask for it, we may, so this is program design stuff, but I believe if they come in and ask for it and they're not asking for installation costs, then that one's pretty easy, right? But if they're asking for installation costs, it actually goes through a review, and most likely they're going to be site inspected before they actually get funding.
Why wouldn't there be a site inspection anyway? Because, I mean, that's a large chunk of money.
Yeah. If there's installed, if they were paying for the installation costs?
If they are paying for the installation, why doesn't the company still require post-build check? Or a post-installation check?
Post-inspection check.
Yeah.
I want to make sure.
So I have my information to you, I get my $30,000, and then, so I don't actually make it work. And I walk away with my $30,000. How are you going to prevent me from doing that?
The DC fast chargers are going to require an inspection.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was comparing the difference between the I call them prescriptive incentives,
Okay.
which were the previous ones.
Okay.
And then this one that has installation costs
Okay.
associated with it. Anything that has an installation cost and a number of this much is going to be. I expect every single DC fast charger is going to fall under that criteria.
Okay.
How will this relate to the line extension program where you're requiring them to put in stuff for EV chargers, you know, that in step on the line extension. And there was a requirement for that, and are they able to get double funds? Because the line extension program has a component of it that said if you're gonna put in EV chargers, there was some kind of encouragement.
Right, so whenever we do incentive applications, we have a requirement that says that will provide them the funding up to the part that they don't get funding from somewhere else, right? So we ask for cost matching, so we're not gonna double incentivize them. But I'm not as familiar with that piece, so I'll have to look into.
The line extension
The line
is more
extension
about
piece.
the conduit.
Right, but
Where this
that's
is
part of
more about the
installation.
It could be.
But it
Yeah.
could, yeah.
Could be.
It'll
But some of that's
facilitate.
beforehand, I mean,
Yeah.
before much is
Yeah.
done.
You know,
Okay.
and the timing is different on those, I believe. But I'm not informed on it enough to.
But it's a good, yeah, because that's part of phase two, right? So, yeah.
Okay. So that's DC fast chargers. Then the grant-based custom projects and partnerships. This one has $500,000 annually for custom projects. This is the piece that corresponds with Artie's question. And the remaining funds from other measures may be reallocated to custom projects after September 1st. The reason for this design is because if we don't get the level twos that we expected, or the other categories that we expected, then we'll use the funds to actually, after September, to fund custom projects, assuming there's custom projects available, right?
It's related, but my question was a little bit different. My scenario was somebody applied, they install I think it was level two we were talking about.
Right.
I install a level 2 charger at my business in October, August, whatever. I apply for funding or an incentive, but there's none available.
Yep.
Can I reapply in January for that October installation?
So the way we're going to manage the year is basically for those incentives, and it's within, is actually that if we receive an application after the September, October timeframe, we're going to fund it in the next year's fund, from the next year's funding component. So there won't be a gap for customers.
And
What
so
about
they don't
August?
have to reapply.
And it doesn't
They don't
matter.
have to reapply.
I'm just saying, sometime during the year, I install a charger, I apply, there's no funds available. Can I apply the next year when the funds become available? So if you have a September line, then you say all those will go into the next year, okay? I apply in June, there's no funds. Can I reapply the next year when more funds are available?
So
Or are we kind of trying to install it this year, that was your window of opportunity?
Well, what we're trying to do is we're trying to incentivize infrastructure
Right.
at the right level. If we're incentivizing where the funds are gone in June, that means we need to go back and look at the incentive level to make sure that it's appropriate so we can kind of spread it out and get more. So our intent is that customers shouldn't run into the issue that you ran into. In the event that they run into the issue that you mentioned, typically we give them, like in the application piece, you have 3 months to up to 6 months, and we're gonna have to figure out together on what the right timeline is for that, and to be able to put in an application and post-purchase. So yes, you could purchase it, for example, even if you were to purchase it in August, we're gonna give customers a reasonable amount of time to actually put in their incentive, and that may not come in until the next year's funding, and that's fine.
So if it comes in the next year's funding, and you have determined that the funding level should be less, they would get the lower level of funding?
They would get the level of funding that is posted at the time they put in the incentive.
Or-
They put in their
Yeah.
application?
Yes, it is based on when they purchase it.
So if you were looking at lowering the incentive, you should consider how much money is outstanding from people who put in
Right.
applications, and then you might have to really lower it, right? If you had quite a few people who had outstanding applications that you ran out of money, so you're gonna pay them in the next year, and you've obviously set the level too high, and you might be thinking it should be 1,000 instead,
Right.
because you have all this outstanding money you need to lower.
The practice that we've always gone with, and we believe that it's the right practice, and we're open to discussion as to whether it is that if we have a posted incentive at a certain level, and the customer provides their application at that time, that's the level that they get it. So I don't see why we would do it any different than that.
Thank you, that was an interesting presentation.
Just to follow to that.
Yeah.
I just noticed in your textbook, you mentioned that the remaining funds or other measures are going to be allocated to the custom budget.
Yes.
Would you ever consider, I mean, some of the things that we're talking about almost begs the question,
Yeah.
whether you go the other direction, because you have a budget of custom, would you maybe allocate that back to these other programs to make up for some of the scenarios we just got to talking about, at least in the near term, to see, as you make the adjustments into the next quarter?
So we had a question come in similar to that. The question was,
Okay.
and I'm going to answer it kind of nuanced, but if I don't answer it, come back to me.
I will.
So if you look at this table up here, what we proposed is this is actually what the annual incentive caps, and that's what we're asking for approval for. Our intent, the intent of this is that this is what the commission's going to approve, and we're going to have it within those annual incentive caps. We had talked about the incentive levels at certain amounts, and maybe being able to adjust them within a reasonable amount of time. The expectation is that we'd be able to adjust those within a 45-day notice, but this table wouldn't change. So if there was a need for that, we would actually work with stakeholders, come back and apply and ask for a change to this.
Is that what that $2 means?
To the annual level.
To the annual incentive
You
caps.
would ask for approval?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
that was not clear for me,
Yeah,
to me from your application.
And I have to go back and read, and I guess what I would recommend is go back and review the statute, see what the statute authorizes. I know there's a miscellaneous fund that flows this way and that way and every way, but I don't remember the details.
For the 2 million?
Just the STEP program period.
It says up to
But
2.
this,
Well, this is up to 2 million, and
Uh-huh.
so that's one question that I think the legislation would govern. I don't know if,
Yeah, so.
I mean,
so
Commissioner
EV
White,
and
we may be
clean
getting
coal
off into
is
areas that we're
separate.
gonna debate in front of the commission.
Yeah. The EV and clean coal was separate, then you had the innovative technologies that had miscellaneous.
Okay.
Those two were pretty hard.
Yeah, so that's what I'm suggesting, is make sure everybody that's filing testimony reviews the statute, to see what the statute is.
Just follow up, my point is, I wasn't thinking increasing the aggregate annual budget, I was thinking between, for example, custom and, say, non-residential AC.
Yeah.
That's what I was talking about, if you could move custom money within that bucket, within the budget, without changing the overall budget level, if you could go back and forth, as you make adjustments to what the
Right.
new incentive should be, given supply and demand.
Right.
Yeah, I misunderstood.
Yeah, that was I'm sorry, I grabbed this table from the actual testimony, and there's a few notes on it.
So I'm trying to, I have to admit, I have not read the filing, but I know that we talked earlier about multifamily, and as I understand it, it's put into the non-residential, but there's also sort of the split incentive to do, if most of the charging is done at home, and there's not really that much of an incentive for multifamily to put in charging. Is there any extra incentive, or is there anything to encourage multifamily in the
Yes,
pilot?
the grant-based custom projects, a multifamily could come in with a proposal for a custom-based incentive. And they could also come in for the non-residential AC level 2 charger, up to 75% of the cost.
But there's nothing that we look for non-residential charging. There's nothing.
You mean for
like a
multifamily?
program that's special for multifamily?
We don't have a call-out extra incentive for multifamily.
Bill, if you don't
Yeah.
have the desired interest from the public, like 6 months into the first year, is there any planning for like point-to-point advertising, or how will people know about this? What will happen if that happens?
So that gets into the program administration, okay? So right here, getting right to it. There were also some questions that came in regarding the request for proposal. We issued it in December 2016. We're expecting a selection in Q2. We only received 2 bidders, and that was for whatever reason. So what we've done is we've got them, reviewing them. There's a process, an internal procurement process that we're going through. So that we haven't brought them in, notified anyone yet of anything, but the next step is to actually do interviews with them, talk to them, go through their proposals, but time will tell. Okay. Their responsibilities, depending on their skill sets, and this is something, I'm going to keep it very high level here. This is something that we found is that their skill set and responsibilities were very different, and we just need to figure out what the right approach is from an administration standpoint. But we're really looking for help with design as things move forward. What do they recommend? Implementation, there's the administration component, the marketing and outreach. Marketing and outreach of that budget of $500,000, we did put something in there, even in the, it might have been in the, either in the tariff or the testimony, that we're calling out at least $100,000 per year for marketing and outreach to go towards this. So if we find that something's not working, how do we go out and get that market, knock on the right doors and get people working on it? We're hopeful that's not the case, but we do have funds allocated to be able to do some targeting. And then there was a question around outreach materials development. With this being so fluid, we actually expect development to continue throughout the whole year, depending on what our needs are and what we're seeing customers are responding to. The first batch is actually going to be focused probably on direct marketing, businesses that are interested in doing the right thing for clean air and offering, possibly chargers at work, possibly free of charge or whatever. One of the things that we've noticed in Utah is there are businesses out there that have done this, and the businesses that do this have a much higher percentage of EV penetration, people that buy EVs, than workplaces that do not offer charging. So we plan to do some direct marketing there, and then we also need to make sure we do some robust web outreach component and also education component. So when people purchase an EV, we want to be able to educate them on the best time to charge, right? There's that demand component that's with EVs, but also encourage them to be part of the time of use program, right? So if we can get customers on the time of use, educate them how that works, and even those that do not move to time of use, if they understand that charging at a later time has a benefit on the infrastructure, that's something that we want to have up right away.
So you'll have that up, but how will people know to even look for that?
That's going to be the challenge, is that out of those, we're still trying to figure out exactly how do we reach those 2,100 customers that are actually registered. There's some privacy concerns. We may be able to go to a third party, but we won't be able to market directly to them, and so there's some nuances associated with it. But our intent is to target the folks that are registered with EVs and work directly with them. With that small of a customer segment, it's not going to make sense to do a customer awareness campaign. You got to do targeted marketing for those. We could do low-cost stuff such as bill inserts, stuff that's on our website, and maybe even some paid advertising on web when customers look up and they're trying to buy possibly a level 2 charger. You may see an ad come up, say, go to Rocky Mountain Power's website, learn how you could participate in some of their programs. Yep.
Are the incentives still in place? And maybe Sarah noticed with the program they were offering on the PU, is that still in place?
That program has run its course. It's not to say we won't do it again, but.
Consultants.
Yeah, I was one of the same.
Yeah, sorry, Tyler, my other partner.
So let me go through my notes here really quick, because I had all the questions written here. Starting Q2. Yep, that's all the that's all the questions at least that were submitted to us.
Would the program administrator do the inspections that you were talking about earlier too, or is that our town power?
That's not right.
Did I miss some? No, so if I missed them, let me know. What did I miss?
I can send them a written question, data request.
Well, if they're,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you will. Okay, so.
Oh, we do it. Let
and
me do a
maybe,
quick time check.
I don't know, Robert might be answering some of these.
oops, sorry. Okay.
Okay, so how will you notify company and the commission and stakeholders of the outcome of the RFP and the details of program administration? Because right now, this is way open-ended as far as I can see.
Yeah, so you're asking how would we notify of what the RFP actually is?
Of the outcome, who you select and what they're going to do, how you're going to administer this program, and more detail about what's going to happen. Design, all of those kinds of things.
I think that's probably even I think that's a larger question of how do we go about making sure that we have the right transparency throughout the next 5 years, right? I think it's probably related, and I'm open to whatever we think is appropriate. So typically, like even with DSM programs, we don't even go into that detail. We'll talk to the stakeholder group that comes together. We'll say, here's what we have. It's confidential because sometimes we get into some details. Not everybody should hear about it and be there. So whatever's appropriate, I want to do but I also think that instead of just looking at that, we actually need to figure out what are we going to do going forward, because that's probably part of it.
Oh, I think that's definitely part of it, but we have to start somewhere. So, okay, that's just a question.
Yep.
Want another one?
Yeah.
Okay. I'd like an example of a circumstance where the company would not require pre-approval for the DC fast charger incentives.
None. That's the one where
Okay, well, your testimony.
it says may,
Yeah.
and there is no example that we came up with.
He was just trying to be agreeable.
Because there's a number of mays in there. Okay, let's see. You answered that one earlier. You sort of answered that one. We had a question about the load research study, and because the time of use, it will contain a mix of level 1 and level 2 chargers.
I'll take that.
Okay.
Yeah,
That was my
sorry,
plan,
I should have
was to
mentioned it. There was a long
Okay.
presentation.
Here's another may for you. Tariff sheet 120.1 footnote reads, see electric service schedule 2E, TOU load research participants may be eligible for a separate $200 incentive per customer. So I wanted to know how you will determine if the load research customer is to receive a separate $200 incentive.
So the extra $200 incentive for participation in the time of use study, there's a smaller subset that's going to participate in it. I'm going to say it really high level, then Robert's going to get into the details, right? There's going to be 3
Or
separate.
I can wait for him.
Well,
know
I think
that-
it's an important answer just from
Okay.
this standpoint, because I'm more on the incentive side, he's on the design side.
Okay.
So there's going to be we're going to go out, ask people to participate in the study. Then they're not going to be, exactly, then they're not going to be able to choose which one they get put into.
Right.
So to be able to encourage customers to participate, because you may participate in it, and you're not even on a time of use rate, and you won't get nothing. So what would incentivize somebody to do it? So the intent from this is if you're in the load research participation study, we're going to offer it out there until it's gone. You can participate in it, but here's the parameters what he'll get into, and basically offer a $200 incentive for participation in that.
Okay, and so why is it a may?
Because not everybody that gets the $200 incentive is going to get that extra $200 incentive.
So potentially.
Okay,
It's only a subset of the folks are going to be in the load research study, and that's going to be based upon a random selection of
Yes.
So follow up, if I may, with what Michelle's asking. So there's potentially, a customer could actually get up to $400 worth of incentive.
they could.
Okay. If they participate, and then they get
Yes.
also get chosen to participate.
Yes.
Right.
so they get $200 for an incentive for being on a
Time
time
of
of
use,
use
correct.
rate.
And then 200.
And then an additional $200 if they are selected to be in the load research part
Right.
of it?
Right, and there's going to be 2 different time of use options that we're going to be
Right,
testing, as
right.
well as a control group.
Right.
And so they're going to be paid $200 to not be on time of use for a year.
So, I'll ask you.
Okay, yeah, that's
Because-
probably,
They might be better
And I
when we
think-
get them on.
yeah, and I think we're actually running
Okay.
right on time. If there's any other questions for me, I can throw it over to Robert. If there's not. Okay, great. Are you on here?
Yeah, I believe so. Let me just go ahead and pass out some of these handouts here. I'll just look through maybe some of them over here, and maybe just start passing it that way. Send it that way. For Michael to bring up the presentation here. But I'm Robert Meredith. I'm going to be discussing specifically the electric vehicle time of use pilot itself, and the rates and how we develop those, and kind of some background around that. A lot of folks may be pretty familiar with it already just because of the work groups, but it up on the screen, it should be. Oh,
I don't think that's right.
That's not part of the
Does anybody know what that is? Wait, I actually do, so I'm...
Someone who participates in the load research study and doesn't get an incentive.
Okay, I'm gonna, just while we're waiting, so the reason I knew what that was is because my son, who by the way is 17, plays this game. It's called Dark Souls. And just to put that in contrast, this is Michael's computer. So just, you know, I actually think they're online friends. They're playing games.
I'll take my leave.
all right, well, let's,
They actually have the same favorite game.
let's go ahead and dive into the electric vehicle time of use pilot. So I'm just going to give an overview of it and discuss some of the various elements that are covered in my testimony. So first of all, why we're doing this is because it is required by the STEP Act, and it specifically says that that there will be time of use pricing for electric vehicle charging, and the time frame for that is to be authorized by the Commission by July 1, 2017. To try to understand better what different stakeholders wanted in a time of use pilot, we had 5 different workshops with a number of different parties to try to figure out some of the nuts and bolts and sort of what folks were looking for in a time of use pilot, and try to understand the scope of it, as well as what they felt like would give us the most robust pilot, and would give us information and fulfill numerous principles and objectives that we had. And so the time of use pilot itself, one of the things that would be a requirement is that customers would have to have DMV registration with a plug-in electric vehicle. So as I believe I think it was Barney, talked about before, there are electric vehicles that are hybrids, but this would be specifically a vehicle that could be plugged in and could charge and fill up their battery and be able to drive off of that. Not necessarily a pure electric, it could be a Volt as well, just a vehicle that has that capability. As far as the number of customers that we were going to have in this pilot, we were going to have a load research study. For that study, we were looking at 3 different groups. We'll talk about that a little bit more in future slides here, but we think that the quantity of customers that we would need for those 3 different groups would be about 120 to 180 customers. We won't actually know until we get the electric vehicle DMV registration, what those actual sizes should be. But our plan is to get that and begin determining the right sizes for each of those. In addition to that, for this pilot, we would also open it up to 1,000 additional customers who would choose to participate in the pilot. As far as the timeline for it, we're looking at a July 1, 2017 effective date. And once we get approval and the rates go into effect, we would start right away with recruiting customers to be on the load research study, because we want to get people on that study as soon as possible, so that way we can get the information and have that in place and understand that, understand their charging behaviors. We would also begin offering the incentives and marketing to participants for the program. The hope there then is to have that all in place so that by the end of 2017, we would have all of our 120 to 180 customers, whatever that number happens to be, recruited onto our load research study. And then we would require those folks to be on the load research study for a 1-year period.
What happens if they want to drop out?
So they
You shut off their service?
No, we wouldn't shut off their service, but they would be required to be on it. So that's part of the tariff, is that you have to be on it for 1 year. These customers would, now, I mean, we also have to factor in that there could be folks that could move, right?
So
I mean, we're not gonna.
terminate service, you need to move or...
Yeah, if they move, I mean, that's gonna change things, but I mean, if they just say, hey, I don't like time of use, I wanna be off of this, the tariff is gonna restrict them from just getting off of it. At the end of that 12 months, folks who are on the load research study, they could stay on that, they could drop out, or they could even possibly change their option, go to the option 2 if they were on option 1. The commitment that we're proposing is just a 1-year commitment for being in the load research study.
Robert, can I ask a quick question with
Yes.
respect to that? Then? So when you run the research study, you've got, let's say you're going to run through this time frame of 18 that concludes. Will you do another study, or are you going to carry the study forward into the next year and then the next year? And so do you need to recruit new participants, or are you just going to kind of cycle through?
We're just gonna
the folks you had?
do it the one time.
Oh, just one time.
And then we could still get information. I mean, there may still be a number of folks who are still on this, and we would still have those meters there collecting the profile information. But we wouldn't re-up it or reshuffle the customers that we were selecting. That study would just stay in place for whoever remained on the rate. Or for the control group didn't remain on the rate, but we would continue to have profile metering on these electric vehicle customers, and some of that could change around. There could be people that move, that kind of thing.
Thank you.
No problem. So then, at the end of 2020, the tariff is going to be closed to new applications. The thought here, and this was something that we discussed in the work groups, was that at that point we would really begin trying to compile all the information, understand what we've learned from the pilot. We would do a lot of surveys, try to understand more about what we've learned, and then near the end of 2021, file a final report with the commission.
I know it's a long ways off, but what do you envision that final report actually be? Just reporting on the pilot? I mean, we're limiting ourselves to, and kind of by consensus in the work groups, but limiting ourselves to 2 options here to look at. And those 2 options obviously are reflected in other studies around the country. So that would be one aspect of the report, I would think, is comparing our results with the results of other studies to see if we're finding similar results or whether they're different because Pacific Core is different or whatever. But there's also all those other potential rate designs that we're not looking at, that are still out there as options that may achieve different goals that we're more interested in. I don't know. Like I said, maybe these are just things to start thinking about now, so.
Because it would be nice to have like recommendations that we include, like what to, do we do a different type of pilot, or so at some point it has to end, and we try to implement one of the rates and transition all the customers off the one rate onto the other rate, you know? Yeah, I mean, rather than just filing a report, but also include recommendations that folks can talk about for next steps.
Yeah.
And I think as part of STEP, there is supposed to be a report to the legislature too.
On the overall, as part of the program.
Particularly, I think.
It wasn't the division.
I think just the programs themselves.
Yeah, but they're living for you, yeah.
And so,
Timing, when we finish this,
Sorry, that, like I said, it's a
No,
long
that's-
ways off, and I just think we need to start thinking about it.
And on page 7 of my testimony, I lay out all the different elements that we would include in that final report. Now, this is just the different data points that we would have. I would envision that we would also have some recommendations as far as next steps, or, you know, like Joel said, if we want to study a different type of design, or maybe we decide that one of the designs is quite successful and we want to continue that, or maybe there needs to be some kind of a change to the rates. You know, those are all things that we would explore.
If you talked about it,
Well, I don't know that I said that we would, in the testimony, that we would specifically have recommendations, but I did lay out all the data points that we would include. And so that includes...
At a minimum,
Yeah, at a minimum, and maybe we would learn some other things that we would also include as well. But just some of the things that we would survey the customers on, as well as some of the information that we would glean from the load research study. So for this load research study, as we've talked about, there are 2 different time of use options, and we would also have a control group. So I'll get into what these 2 different time of use options are pretty soon here, but these groups, we would randomly select which customers would be in these groups, and then they would have the opportunity to be able to participate in that load research study for an additional $200 as a thank you credit at the end of the study. So at the end of 2018, they would receive that $200. If they were on option 1 or option 2, they could also receive $200 as an incentive as part of the what Bill described. The control group would just get the $200 thank you for being on the load research study, and they would be required to not be on a time of use option.
Right, okay, so that goes back to my question.
Yes.
Because these 3 groups are all part of the load research study. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so the tariff says that, oh, never mind, I see what you're saying, never mind, got it.
Okay. Because what we're trying to measure here is we're trying to see, okay, we have a bunch of customers who plug in their electric vehicles. Some we're going to put on one time of use rate, some we're going to have on another time of use rate, and some are just going to behave like they normally would. And so from that, we would be able to see what kind of difference in charging behavior do we see from these 2 different time of use options, and understand how does that change you know, what their peak capacity is, and gain some understanding from that. The universe that we'd be looking at is plug-in electric vehicles that are registered with the DMV. And the design of it would be per our standard load research way that we design stratified random samples with a plus or minus 10% confidence at the 90%, plus or minus 10% precision level at the 90% confidence. Okay. The rates themselves are similar in a lot of ways to Schedule 1 in the sense that the basic charge is the same. We continue to have the $8 minimum charge. What would be different is there would not be any tiering of energy. These customers would be sent a fairly sharp price signal to use electricity during the off-peak period. Rate option 1 is a more moderate ratio between on and off-peak rates. It's about a 3-to-1 differential, about 7 cents for the off-peak period and 22 cents for the on-peak period. Option 2 is a much more pronounced differential. So this is looking specifically at a on-peak rate of 34 cents and an off-peak rate of 3.4 cents. And the intention here with not having the tiering is that we wanted to encourage electric vehicle adoption. And the tiering of energy prices can be a barrier for customers since they are adding a significant new load to their usage. And so having these rates not be tiered does not discourage them from driving their electric vehicle more or deciding to have a second electric vehicle and driving more miles on those vehicles. So that was a key component of these rates. As far as the period in which we selected for on-peak, we specifically looked at the last 5 cost of service studies that we filed with the commission. And we looked at the distribution coincident peaks as well as the system coincident peaks. And those are the timing of those, the hours when those actually occurred. And both of those items are very key drivers within our cost of service study in terms of how costs are allocated to different customer classes. So we felt that it was important to have a rate that was really specifically targeting the times when our peak occurs. The period that we selected is in the summertime between 3 and 8 p.m. and in the wintertime 3 to 8 p.m. as well as an 8 to 10 period in the morning. This specific, and that excludes weekends and holidays. This specific time frame, these hours, capture about 94% of all the system coincident peaks as well as all the distribution coincident peaks that were in the last 5 filed cost of service studies. So we're really trying to really target those peak periods. So that way customers have options in terms of being able to use electricity outside of those periods, but still giving ourselves a reasonable assurance that we're sort of capturing the full range or a vast majority of the full range of when those peak periods occur. And that's illustrated in my Exhibit 3 for this filing. One of the things that we looked at, one of the exhibits, my Exhibit 5, shows just what does this mean in terms of the incremental cost of fuel vehicle. So we took a very specific example of a customer who drove 1,157 miles, and this value is based upon some national source of governmental source that showed the total number of average miles driven per vehicle in Utah. And so this is what we saw was that average. And then we're just assuming if this person brought on that electric vehicle and just charged it completely during the off-peak period, how would this compare to a internal combustion engine or what we think of as a traditional gasoline vehicle? The other assumption we thought of was that we looked at a household usage of about the average, which is 698 kilowatt hours per month. So that way the present rates consider that and consider how that additional incremental load would impact their rates in terms of the different tier blocks. We looked at a gasoline price of $2.25 a gallon. And then we did look at a pretty fuel efficient vehicle, a new internal combustion vehicle that has a 36.4 mile per gallon fuel efficiency rating. So, thinking about all of that, a customer who fueled this vehicle with gasoline would spend about $71.50 per month fueling that vehicle. On our present Schedule 1 tariff, that customer would spend about $41.13 a month charging that vehicle. So some savings, about $30 a month for that customer. That customer was on our present time of day rates, Schedule 2. There would be a little bit of savings, but not a whole lot relative to Schedule 1, about $38, $39 to charge up that vehicle. On Option 1, there would be more savings, about $24 to charge the vehicle, and Option 2, the incremental cost to fuel that vehicle would be $12. So pretty good savings for this Option 2 customer if they're charging all during the off-peak period. They could save, relative to gasoline, nearly $60. And as we mentioned too, this is for a fairly fuel-efficient vehicle, 36.4 miles per gallon. Those savings would even be more if this was a less fuel-efficient vehicle. Those savings could also be more too if the cost of gasoline were to rise in the future. So we laid that out there for context so that way folks could understand specifically the value proposition that's being provided with this time of use rate. Now I'm going to launch into just how did we develop these rates and what was the basis for them. This is all shown on my Exhibit 7. It's also shown on the work papers file under the rate design tab. And specifically, we used load research information from the last GRC to estimate, based upon that load research sample for the residential class, what was the percentage of energy consumption that was on peak versus off peak. And then, based upon that information, we designed energy charges that were revenue neutral for the class given this assumed profile. The first point that we looked at was designing Option 2, which, as you'll remember, this is the more pronounced differential between on-peak and off-peak prices, with the roughly 10 to 1 differential between those two. To start out with, we set the off-peak energy rate to what our cost of service study in our last general rate case shows to be the energy-related unit costs. And so that was the basis for this 3.4 cent off-peak energy charge. Then, after we apply that, as well as the minimum charge, the basic charge, we then determine what is the remaining revenue requirement based upon the rates that were set in the last GRC in order to collect the rest of, or recover the rest of the costs for the on-peak energy charge. And for that, then, that sets the price of 34 cents for the on-peak energy charge. Option 1, what we did with this option is we specifically, first of all, looked at what is the average rate for energy irrespective of the different tier blocks that occur. So considering the mix of energy that occurs in the summer and the winter, and that's below 400 kilowatt hours and above 1,000 kilowatt hours, and the different rate blocks that we have, we determined what is the average rate, and the average rate was about 10.18 cents per kilowatt hour. Then we made movement from that rate towards this 3.4 cent energy-related rate that we have in TOU Option 2, and making a 50% movement towards that level yields a price of about 6.8 cents per kilowatt hour. And then we also do the same process whereby we determine the level of revenue based upon those billing determinants from the last GRC, and determine how much would go to this, as well as the basic charge, the minimum charge, and how much is left. And the remainder is 22.3 cents a kilowatt hour. And so then that becomes the basis for the on-peak charge for TOU option 1. And so both of these are revenue neutral for the average profile. Any questions?
I have a
Sarah?
question, Robert. Is there somewhere in your spreadsheets that shows the percentage of energy use without an EV on peak and off peak?
No, we don't have that information. We don't know, and that's part of, I think, what we're going to learn from this
But I mean,
pilot
just
is-
now, just without an EV, you don't know. like,
Yeah, so I mean,
is
what
it
this
a
is based
research
upon
study?
is just the full residential class that we have. We haven't really specifically, looked into the profiles and what those will look like for an EV before, and that's what we'll see
But I'm
with our
thinking
research study.
without an EV, I'm just wondering, from your just overall load research.
What
study.
is it without an EV?
Yeah, do you have an idea of how much is within that 5-hour window, the percentage?
The
of it?
percentage of them.
Is that in your filing?
I could sure find that out. I don't actually have it memorized.
Do you want, I can.
Sorry, I guess I don't understand the question.
You're
So I'm
wanting
just
the
trying to
percentage of
figure out
energy.
just now, just a regular customer,
Uh-huh.
what percentage of your use?
Is within,
In
so from
that-
just our
Is within.
regular residential profile, how much falls within that?
Yeah,
that
what
on-peak
percentage of the
period? Oh, okay.
kilowatt hours sold?
I can tell you here really quick. Sure.
If you do, just direct me to the table.
Sure, it's Exhibit 6, and so there's about, let's see here. Maybe I should probably get back to you on that.
Okay.
I mean, that would probably, I can,
Maybe
it's a smaller percentage. I want to say it's between, well, I think what I have right here shows it's about 570 million kilowatt hours on peak to 2194 million kilowatt hours off peak. So that's, was it
You
roughly?
just take the percentage of the billing determinants,
Yeah, you can do that. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, that's, what is that, roughly 6 out of 22, 20, 30%. I could calculate it, yeah.
I thought I
20%
heard-
are on peak, 22%.
Yeah, it's a smaller percentage that's on peak, for sure.
I thought I heard you say earlier, in order to develop option 2 rate, that was one of the first steps you did, was you
Yes.
determined what was on peak and off peak.
Correct.
How is what Sarah's asking differ from what you were talking about?
It's not different. at
It's
all.
not different.
I just didn't have the number
Okay.
memorized.
Okay.
I didn't know the exact percentage off the top of my head.
But it's somewhere in that 22 to 25.
Yeah, I can get a calculator. Knew I should have brought a calculator here. It's the one time I don't bring a calculator that I needed.
No, yeah, I can go to Exhibit 6 too, so.
I actually really like using a calculator in meetings, so.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay, so that is how we developed TOU option 1. Any other questions on that? Does that make sense to folks? So then, kind of lastly, just discussion of the tariff itself, and just kind of some of the features that are part of our proposed Schedule 2E. One of the elements that we are including in this is a guarantee payment. This is a guarantee that over the course of an annual period, if their energy costs were greater than 110% of what they would have been on Schedule 1 after the first year, we would refund that difference to the customer. This is something that we have in Oregon, and is helpful to get people to sign up and to realize that there is still, for that first year, there's still skin in the game in terms of that 10%. But it can help people allay some of the fears that that they may not want to go on this rate or take the risk. And then after the first year, that guarantee payment would not be there. Also, the tariff itself requires that the customer submit a copy of their DMV registration to the company, or be selected in the load research study, in which case we would have determined that that customer did have an eligible plug-in electric vehicle that was registered with the DMV. We require a 1-year commitment, and it has some of the same credit provisions as Schedule 2. And finally, one other element that we considered with the Schedule 2 is that it would exclude co-participation in the net metering program or in the subscriber solar program. For the net metering program, this was a topic of discussion at the work group. The thought there was that we have a pending filing with the commission right now. We don't know the outcome of that. Also, we felt that for the load research study, we did not want to have the complexities of a customer generator sort of skew the information or make it hard for us to understand and not be specifically looking at the charging behavior of an electric vehicle customer. For subscriber solar, I think that there were just complexities with the billing system that we just didn't have in our billing system right now to be able to handle. Any question? Oh, and Cheryl, your question was on the load research study. I believe the question was, how would the load research study be impacted by level 1 versus level 2?
Right, because you'll have a mix.
Right, because you're going to have a mix inherent within that. And I think that, like any other load research study, we're not specifically considering, the range and the variety of different end uses beyond just that they have an electric vehicle that they can plug in and charge. Similar to other classes that we have load research information on. For example, if we have an irrigation load research study, we know that there's a variety of crops that are being irrigated. We know that there may be different types of pumps that they're using. But we're not specifically, identifying each one of those different types of or different sort of permutations for how they're pumping and how they're, what type of technology they have. I think that's pretty analogous to this situation. I think also the same thing holds for our residential load research sample. We have a variety of end uses that occur, different adoptions of air conditioning, different, even though a lot of Utah customers are natural gas customers, there would still be inherent in that some who may heat with electricity. We know that there's a variety, and we know that there will be customers who have different vehicles within that load research study. Some will have a Tesla, some may have a Chevy Volt or the Nissan Leaf, and some may have level 1 or level 2, and we know that that's going to be inherent within that sample, but the principle will be that sample will be a good estimate of what the profile is for these customers relative to the time when it was put in place.
But one of the things that we're looking at is adoption of, and what happens, what's the impact of this time of use rate versus that time of use
Correct.
rate. And if you have level 1 and level 2 in time of use rate 1, then the charging pattern, I'm not sure that gives you a real good feel for a charging pattern, because if you have a level 2, you're going to be charging for less time, whereas a level 1, most likely you're going to be charging longer. So does that impact your moving out? Yeah.
I mean,
just have some concerns about that.
I mean, one thing that we will ask in our survey absolutely will be what type of charger you have. So we would be able to merge that information and understand that as well. After we complete the survey for the customers, we would be able to glean some information in terms of, here's level 1 versus level 2. Initially, when we set up our load research sample, we're going to be just randomly selecting from the universe of plug-in electric vehicle customers. And so then we design that right and look at our sampling variable, which is kilowatt hour usage. We would expect to get a representative sample that would include a mix of level 1 and level 2 that would at least be roughly proportional to what we would see in the population.
So Robert, just a follow-up question to that. So in the post-survey, if I may call it that, you're going
Yes.
to be able to gather demographic information.
Yes.
And you'll be able to identify, or let me ask you this, will you be able to identify that demographic information with a specific customer within each of the groups? Because I mean, if you're selecting them randomly, I'm assuming you're still going to have all information about that customer to a point.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you could refine, if
Could.
asked, you could refine it to, on time of use 1, level 1 people reacted this way, and
Level 2 reacted, yeah, that's right.
Cheryl, you just have to be careful about what inferences back to the population that you can draw from that, because that was not what the sample is designed to
Right,
answer.
yeah.
Right.
It might be interesting information, but I would hesitate to draw broad, general inferences.
I would agree with that. So does that answer your question? Sure. Okay. Just want to make sure. Okay. Did I?
I didn't hear a yes.
You didn't hear no.
Take it where you can get it.
And then you had
one or the other in testimony.
And then you had another load research question. Did I answer that? Just want to make sure that
While she's looking for that, going back to the percentage on peak, when you were describing that was the percentage on peak as you're defining the on peak in the options.
That's right.
Proposed schedules. Okay. I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
It's not your priority. Estimates.
No, I think the other load research kind of went to the tariff, and I'm going to ask you that offline because I'm not agreeing with your answer, so.
Oh, on the level 1 and level 2.
On the tariff, the incentive payment, so we'll talk about that.
Oh, sure. Right. Anybody else? Okay. Well, thanks for listening and hearing about the electric vehicle time of use pilot.
Is that all?
Yeah. Yep, that's it.
That's it, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.